Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's deep dive is going to be a tough one. We're going to be looking at that accusation that Christianity, well, that's basically built on injustice.
Yeah.
And I know that can be kind of a tough pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you've seen some, shall we say, not so Christian behavior from, well, Christians.
Right.
Or maybe you've wondered about the church's role in some of the, well, darker parts of history.
Yeah.
So we're going to use Timothy Keller's book, The Reason for God, to unpack all of that, the good, the bad, and the really, really complicated.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so Keller starts off with this group of law students he talked to, and they were really turned off by Christianity. And honestly, I kind of get it.
Okay.
They were saying that the Christians they knew, well, they weren't always the nicest people in the room.
Right.
In fact, they saw a lot of non-Christians who seemed, well, a lot more compassionate.
Yeah.
Kind of makes you think, right?
It does. And actually, Keller talks about this guy, Mark Lilla,
Okay.
who left the faith because of this very thing.
Wow.
He was part of this really vibrant Christian community,
Okay.
but he found it to be really restrictive and judgmental, and it eventually drove him away from Christianity completely.
Wow, that's intense. So, how do you square that with the idea that Christianity is supposed to be all about love and goodness?
Yeah, it's a great question.
If the people aren't living it out, what's the point?
Right. And that's where this whole idea of common grace comes in. So I want you to think of God's kindness like sunshine.
Okay.
It shines on everyone, whether you believe in him or not. Right? So you can have atheists who are incredible people,
Sure.
and you can have believers who are still, working on things. It's not about earning goodness. It's about recognizing that it's everywhere.
So common grace basically means that, yeah, atheists can be awesome people.
That's right.
It's not a competition. I like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
But what about this whole idea that Christians are flawed? I mean, we've all met those Christians, right?
Right.
The ones who seem to have missed the memo on humility.
Yeah. No, Keller actually addresses that head on, and he uses this analogy.
Okay.
He says the church is a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints.
Ooh.
It's kind of a powerful image, right?
That's a powerful image. It's like we're all works in progress, bumping around in the emergency room of life. No one has arrived yet.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So Christianity recognizes that people within the church are going to mess up.
Yeah.
We're all on a journey, and it's not about being perfect to get in. It's about recognizing that you need help in the first place.
Yeah, it's like we all start the race at different points.
Yeah.
You can't really compare someone who's been a marathoner for years with someone who's just tying their shoes for the first time.
Right, exactly.
But, and this is key, acknowledging that doesn't excuse actual harm done by people, or by the church as a whole.
Of course not. Recognizing human imperfection doesn't erase responsibility. It just gives us, a more complete picture
Totally.
when we're trying to figure out the relationship between faith and, well, how people actually behave.
Yeah, yeah. So we've talked about how individuals can be flawed, but what about the whole church throughout history? I mean, that's where things get really complicated, right?
They do.
The Crusades, colonialism, slavery, I mean, the list goes on. And I'm thinking about what Christopher Hitchens,
Right.
who was a, pretty famous critic of religion,
Yeah.
he said that religion just inherently makes conflict worse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't deny that some truly awful things have been done in the name of Christianity.
Absolutely not. But it's not as simple as saying, religion equals violence.
Mm-hmm.
For example, some of the worst acts of genocide in the 20th century, those were actually done by regimes that had totally rejected religion.
Oh, wow.
Think about Stalinist Russia or Maoist China.
Yeah, and it's not like saying, cars are dangerous just because some people drive like maniacs. So if it's not just about religion, what is it about humans? Why do we keep using these big ideas to justify violence?
Well, Keller brings in this other theologian, Alistair McGrath, and he's got this really interesting take. He says that humans, we have this deep need to be on the right side of things.
Okay.
We need to feel like we're the good guys.
Sure.
And to do that, we'll latch on to anything,
Okay.
to give us that sense of moral superiority.
Okay, so it could be religion, but it could be our country or our race, even just an idea like freedom or justice.
Exactly.
We need something to make us feel like, yeah, we're the good guys.
Exactly. And the scary thing is, once you believe that your group has that ultimate truth, it's way too easy to justify hurting the people who don't.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. So it's not that religion is inherently bad or violent,
Right.
but it's more like it can be twisted.
Yeah.
It can be used for bad, just like any other powerful tool, I guess.
Exactly. We have to be honest about our capacity for violence, even when it's hiding behind a mask of, being holy or righteous.
Yeah.
And that doesn't let anyone off the hook, especially not when it comes to acknowledging the harm that's been done in the name of faith.
You know what's interesting, though? For a lot of people, it's not really the violence that turns them off from Christianity.
Okay.
It's something else. It's like that whole holier-than-thou vibe.
Right, right.
The judgmental, intolerant types.
Mm.
Those are the fanatics, I think is what Keller calls them.
And that's where things get really interesting, because I think when a lot of people hear the word fanatic, they think about someone who's just like way too into their religion, right?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
But Keller, he kind of flips that on its head.
Wait, so you can be too religious, but not religious enough. What does that even mean?
Okay, so think about the qualities that people usually associate with a fanatic.
Okay.
Rigid, self-righteous, lacking empathy.
Sure, yeah.
Keller says that those qualities, those are actually the opposite of what Jesus was about.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. So you can be super intense about your beliefs, but if you're not reflecting, the love and humility and compassion that Jesus embodied, you've missed the point.
Exactly. You've missed the whole point. It's like that saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Okay.
True Christian fanaticism, it's not about perfectly following the rules.
Right.
It's about letting your faith transform you, like from the inside out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So real Christian fanaticism isn't about how intensely you believe something.
Right.
It's about how closely you live out Jesus's example of love and humility.
Yes.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
And here's the thing, Christianity, it's not about just being silent in the face of injustice.
Right.
It's about actively fighting it.
Right.
And what's really interesting is that some of the strongest words against injustice, they actually come straight from the Bible itself.
Really? The Bible calls out religious hypocrisy. That's interesting. I've never really thought about that.
Absolutely. It's not just this black and white, religion's good, everything else is bad kind of thing.
Right.
Keller talks about how the prophets, like Isaiah, Jeremiah, they were always calling out religious people who use their faith to justify oppressing other people.
So this whole using religion to justify bad behavior thing, it's not exactly a new problem, is it?
Nope, not at all. People have been wrestling with that one for centuries.
Yeah. What about Jesus? How did he deal with those super religious types? The ones who are all about appearances instead of actually, living it out.
Well, you don't have to look any further than the Sermon on the Mount, right? Jesus didn't save his harshest words for the non-religious folks. Oh, no. He aimed those right at the religious leaders who were using their power to, to exploit others.
Like those Pharisees.
Mm-hmm.
Always worried about looking good more than doing good, right?
That's it, exactly. And that gets right to what Keller's talking about, this idea that, well, he quotes John Calvin, who said that God himself, he identifies with the poor and the marginalized.
Wow.
So how we treat the people who are struggling, the people on the edges of society, well, that shows how we really see God.
That's intense. It's like, it completely changes the game for anyone who tries to use religion as an excuse to ignore the people who need help.
It does. And it brings up this really interesting question, too.
Okay.
Where do our modern values, the ones we're using to judge these failings of the church in the first place, where did those come from? Just something to think about.
Hold on. Are you saying that our ideas about what's wrong, like exploiting people,
Yeah.
that those ideas might actually come from Christian values? That's kind of mind-blowing.
It is. And Keller brings up this historian, C. John Somerville, who makes a fascinating case for this. Somerville says that even a lot of the secular critiques of Christianity, they're built on a foundation that comes straight from Christianity itself.
So even when we think we're rejecting Christianity, we might still be using Christian values to decide what's right and wrong. How does that even work?
Okay, so Somerville uses this example about the Anglo-Saxons. Before Christianity, they were all about honor and reputation. Everything was about looking strong and powerful. So he asks his students to imagine this. You see an old lady with a purse. Why not just rob her?
Okay, that took a turn, but I get it. What's the point?
Right. So in that old honor-based system, you wouldn't rob the lady because it would make you look bad, like a coward. It was about protecting your ego. But Christianity, it brought in this totally different idea, this other regarding ethic, as he calls it.
Other regarding ethic. What's that mean?
It means you don't rob the lady because it would hurt her. not because of what it says about you. Makes sense.
Oh, okay. So instead of what does this say about me,
Yeah.
it's what impact will this have on someone else?
Exactly. It's a revolutionary idea, really. And what Somerville found was that most of his students, even the ones who weren't religious, they were operating from that other regarding viewpoint, even if they didn't realize it.
Interesting. So even without knowing it, we've kind of absorbed these values from Christianity, and they're affecting how we see the world.
Yeah.
But it's like you said earlier,
Yeah.
that doesn't erase the fact that really terrible things have been done in the name of Christianity.
Right.
So how do we hold those two things together?
And that's where Keller says we have to look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad stuff has been done, but Christianity has also been a force for incredible good. He talks about William Wilberforce and the fight to end slavery in England.
Oh, yeah. Good old Wilberforce. He was a real champion for that cause. And he didn't just talk about it either. He actually did something.
Oh, yeah. He and the other abolitionists, they were willing to risk everything to make it happen. They even pushed the government to, get this, compensate slave owners.
Whoa. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is.
Right. And it was a huge amount of money at the time. I mean, some historians call it voluntary econicide.
Econicide. That's
Yeah.
intense. But it shows how strongly they believed in what they were doing, right? Even if it cost them everything.
And it wasn't a one-time thing either. Look at the civil rights movement in America. Keller points out how deeply rooted it was in the Black church and how Martin Luther King Jr. was constantly pushing people to live up to their faith.
Yeah, King didn't let anyone off the hook for that hypocrisy, especially not white Christians who supported segregation.
Absolutely. He challenged them to make their actions match their words. And that's the same thread that connects people like Wilberforce, King, Desmond Tutu, all these people of faith who stood up against injustice. It's this deep understanding that faith isn't passive. It demands action.
So it's not about pretending that the church has always been perfect or that it's never done anything wrong.
Right.
It's about seeing how Christianity itself. It gives us the tools to recognize injustice, but it also inspires us to create a better world.
And recognizing that we're all capable of both, the great and the not so great, as individuals and as a community.
Which brings us to a really important question that I think we all have to wrestle with. If both oppression and liberation have been done in the name of Christianity, then what does that say about faith itself? And what does it mean for how we choose to live out our own beliefs, whatever they may be? That's something for all of us to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.